My name is Heather Griffiths. I'm working with Charoula on a team led by Professor Simonetta Manfredi to look at this project we've been working on, women in spin-out companies under Inclusion Matters from EPSRC. Charoula will tell you a little bit more about the project itself.
Right. So today we're going to draw on findings from research into women's leadership of university spin-out companies. And what we're going to do, we're going to illustrate how systemic equality, diversity and inclusion issues become internalized by employees and make some recommendations for how organizations can address this. Now, we will do a brief overview of the research project, and we will focus on three key issues: stereotypes, confidence and time, to invite organizations to reflect and take action to support women and minorities who may be experiencing additional challenges in the workplace. Now, before we touch upon these three issues, we're going to say a few words about the project so you understand a bit the context. Now, the Spin-Out Agenda project that we're working on provides an insight into spin-outs, how they're experienced, and what are the barriers, enablers, challenges perceived by different groups within universities. Now, in case you're not aware, spin-outs are defined as registered companies set up to exploit intellectual property that has originated from within a higher education provider, such as a university. Now, our project is composed of three stages. In the first stage, colleagues conducted a quantitative analysis of existing spin-out data. And of course, they found an underrepresentation of women founders, and actually a concentration of spin-outs in regional hotspots such as Cambridge, Oxford, and London. It was interesting because I think the previous speaker talked about this as well to some extent. In the second stage, we did interviews with 35 founders of spin-outs, and we also did focus groups with early career researchers to understand how they perceive academic entrepreneurship and spin-outs. Now, the emphasis of the project is on gender, but we do think that many findings and lessons apply for other underrepresented groups. Now, what do we mean by internalization? There are general definitions of internalization, as you can see in this slide, but in a few words, we perceive internalization as a process where individuals are made to feel responsible for issues that might be beyond their control, as we will show in terms of confidence, managing the time and everything. Now, you will probably say how this spin-out project is actually related to organizations and companies. This is an EDI project, and it has highlighted some issues that we think actually can be present to various organizations beyond academia. And we would like to share some of this and invite organizations to reflect how this might play out and what organizations can do to address them. Of course, organizations are interested in equality and diversity. This is why probably they will attend this event. But we also know that from a lot of research, actually organizations have processes, practices, and policies that are not as neutral as they seem to be. We will try to identify and reflect upon this during the presentation. Furthermore, we would like to emphasize how entrepreneurship can be similar to intrapreneurship, which is about individuals who use an entrepreneurial mindset to innovate within organizations, within companies. So I think I'm going to give the floor now to Heather to talk about these three key issues.
Thanks, Charoula. So as Charoula mentioned at the beginning, we've drawn upon this research to emphasize three issues. We've just selected three issues here. There could be very many more, but these are the ones we think that could probably be quite relatable within the business. So first of all, so this is the idea of stereotypes. So as the minorities in both business world and in STEM, women are subject to experiencing stereotype. So the two examples we have in the research are what a woman scientist looked like. So this was an example where a woman was asked to look less glamorous, so she looked more like a scientist. And the second idea that women CEOs, bearing in mind these are founders who have founded their own spin-out companies, are accused of sleeping their way to the top. So there's also evidence that we have of racial stereotyping. So that will apply to all underrepresented groups in an arena. Part of our research explores, we want to explain why this matters it creates an additional challenge for women and minorities in what is already quite a challenging environment setting up their own business. So you may have heard of terms like microaggressions, and we explain how accumulated disadvantage is a similar idea. It's the principle that perhaps one instance of stereotyping isn't a challenge in and of itself, but small but regular occurrences create a bigger challenge. That's something that women and minorities are more likely to face. So just to reflect on what this means for the business, I can put up a slide today, here we go. First of all, within a business setting, we can raise awareness that this is a problem. That stereotypes are not an individual issue, they're a bigger structural problem. You've probably heard of things like unconscious bias trainings. We suggest that they're quite a good starting point. This can be followed and it can start up some discussions to talk about how people may be affected by biases and stereotypes. You could also, this training can be expanded upon to look at giving employees and colleagues more tools to intervene. So kind of intervention training, this is often referred to call out these stereotypes. And just to create a more positive and inclusive environment for everybody that's working there. So these stereotypes don't become pervasive and off-putting for people in the workplace. The second idea is that of confidence. We quite often say or assume that women and minorities are lacking in confidence. That's why they don't put themselves forward. So to do so, we think of initiatives to help them develop their confidence. There were some examples in our research that really showed how confidence isn't an individual issue. It's actually caused by some bigger systemic or structural occurrences. Firstly, we say this is information and inspiration. So information being that people don't actually have the knowledge, they don't have to know how to make something happen. In this case, it was spin out companies. And also inspiration. People, women and minorities are less likely to have role models that they can look up to when they're looking to achieve something. These quotes here are just examples of how that was played out for the participants. It can be harder for those who are underrepresented to feel confident about their ideas. So in our study, there was many participants who didn't feel confident in spinning out. They didn't think their research was good enough. But when we probed this in more depth, it was more apparent that it was because they didn't have examples of people who were doing it in their discipline, or they didn't have examples of people that were like them. They didn't feel it was something they were able to do. They didn't know where to turn to for support either. So what can we do about this? Reflecting upon this, it is about creating a more open culture. So everybody feels they can ask. So that they feel this is where the entrepreneur and intrapreneur align, really. It's having a culture where colleagues can, irrespective of their age, background, gender, career grade, they can voice their ideas. They can think that their ideas are worth hearing, that they are good ideas. It's making clear who it is to contact, transparent communication structures, simple ideas like maybe having a particular email inbox or physical box there where people can put ideas down, put their name, have ideas attributed to them. Increasing invisibility of more diverse role models. So I think, and this has probably been touched upon already, I know it's touched upon by the previous speaker, but the idea of just promoting success stories, however small they may be, just so those who are in the minority can see that it's something is achievable for them. And be an ally. There's options to actually ask people if they have ideas, ask them directly if there's anything they want to share, to speak up. So a final example, as we're actually rushing through a little bit for time, is this idea.
You're good on time.
Okay, great. So I'll focus on time. So this is a lack of problem for us all right now. I think we can all relate to lack of time, and some of us may feel it's getting worse. It was quite a ubiquitous problem amongst the academics we spoke to as well. They felt that they needed more support to manage their time and work-life balance. And this is how we're explaining how these things become internalized, because they were taking it upon themselves as their responsibility to manage time, to have a successful work-life balance. But it just wasn't physically possible for many of them, because their workplaces, the universities, were not giving them the time they needed to focus on their spin out, on their jobs. Part of their job wasn't perhaps deemed as important. They wanted more time from their universities, and they wanted their employer to recognise the value in this work they were doing, in this spin out work. There was also another slight element to this, that women with children were perhaps having to be a bit more, they had to challenge this a bit more. They were being a little bit more visionary, creating their own ways of working, because they really wanted to, and in some cases had no choice but to, incorporate the childcare with their work a lot more. They were resisting cultures of all working hours, and when and where they worked, they were being a bit more creative in how they used their time. But when we reflect on this to think about how it can apply more again in this business sense, the takeaway message, I think, is that time management isn't an individual problem. Some are more able to manage their time than others. It depends on their responsibilities at work and home. It depends on the support structures. In our sample, it was mostly women with children that had thought of these alternative ways of working, but lockdown has very much showed us how we all appreciate the flexibility on the whole, but there are a lot of negative sides to flexibility. So it's making space to have these conversations about what is and what isn't working for people. Is flexible working your current setup? It's all going to be renegotiated. Then another final point really on this was that so the current working structures we have already been challenged. Now, what can we do to challenge them more? An example we have from the research is the idea of networking, mentoring events, all being held in the evening after work with drinks. This wasn't an ideal time for a lot of people, whether they have caring responsibilities or not. Not a lot of people are able to attend after work, want to necessarily have a drink for either personal, health, religious reasons, have people having to travel. So one way to challenge these norms around time is to think about different ways and different times to hold such events. As one of our founders put it, perhaps we could do it over tea and cake one time instead. So that was a very whiz-through overview of our examples and how we try to explain how some of these bigger issues that some founders and some colleagues of ours probably feel, to explain how they are more systemic issues that businesses and organisations can address. I'm going to hand back over to Charoula just to give us a quick summary of that.
Yeah, so we
We lost you, Heather. Charoula, sorry.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you, Heather. So we described 3 areas that showed how individuals internalize challenges as if the responsibility lies on them, rather than the wider environment in which they operate. Now, we would like to ask you to consider, reflect how these issues are actually structural rather than individual, and how small changes can make underrepresented groups feel more included in your workplace. I mean, we're talking about small changes, but small changes are important because it is the right thing to do. It is about justice. It's about the duty of care, but I think also can have a great impact, not only in terms of the usual business case of EDI, preventing waste talent and become attractive to talented employees. It can have potential for innovation, of course, but it could also make a difference in creating and nurturing working environment where employees feel belonging and actually they feel loyal to. So I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you,
Charoula. The point that you made about confidence struck me. I mean, it's a case that, a point that a lot of our speakers today have made, needing to have examples, role models, to give those, in your case, women, the confidence to speak up, to feel value in what they're doing. And that's certainly one that, as I say, we've seen it a lot today. And it's, go back to our role, I think it's our role to showcase some of those case studies so that we can help these individuals gain more confidence. So thank you very much. Great to see you both. And you've got a call to action here.
Anybody wants to get in touch?
Yeah, by all means. I mean, the project, we've got quite a nice network setting up now around this project in the Oxford area. So if anybody is just looking for how they can increase youth diversity and inclusion, and get involved with us. Feel free to get in touch. We've got several events coming up as well, which will be on our website and Twitter.